Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Ma ba'd. What is the difference between Qiyas, Ijtihad and Istidlal? And maybe if we can throw in there Daleel. Qiyas is analogy. So now, in the Sharia, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a book, Tibyan li kulli shay, has explained everything. However, there are certain things that happen after revelation which have no direct revelation for. So for example, what's the ruling on us using phones, sitting in cars, eating particular types of food, and all these different things that have not been mentioned in the texts directly. In order for us to come to a ruling to that, we need to come to a process which is known as Qiyas. It's a tool, it's a part of Daleel, which seems to be the correct view between the ulama of usul, that is evidence in and of itself. And with that Qiyas, we can come to a ruling. So now, what is the ruling on me eating chicken burgers? Okay, despite the fact that it might be harmful, whatever, but what is the ruling on it? Okay, food has been made permissible and we've got evidence for that in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everything on earth for you. So with that, we've got a ruling, that ayah. With that, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made food permissible. Therefore, we can use that to apply to a ruling on something which is new, which has not directly been mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah, and say, okay, it's permissible for you to eat chicken burgers. Okay, that's Qiyas, analogy which is necessary to come to a ruling on something which the Quran or Sunnah directly hasn't mentioned, but the fundamentals and the precedence is already there in the texts. Ijtihad. Ijtihad is badl al-juhd, as the ulama have said, where the mujtahid, the scholar, and the conditions for a scholar, we'll talk about perhaps on another occasion, but an actual scholar will basically sit down and say, okay, we need a ruling on something. This might not necessarily be Qiyas, there might be something which is direct already found in the Quran and Sunnah, and say, okay, here's the evidence for such and such. So for example, what is the ruling? Where do you place your hands in the salat? There's no Qiyas involved. So the scholar will basically come and sit down and say, basically, okay, here's the evidence to say put it on the chest. Here's the evidence to say let it dangle on the sides. Here's the evidence to say put it below the navel. Here's the evidence to say put it just above the navel. All of this is ijtihad. And what he will do is he'll come to his conclusion based on what he thinks is sounder and closer to what the evidence wants from him. This is ijtihad. To look at the evidences, look at all the evidences and to come to a conclusion. Qiyas is when you come to a conclusion of something which is new, which is not found. Ijtihad, you've got something which is there, which you will, as the mujtahid will feel, is direct. Daleel. Daleel is Quran and Sunnah, Ijma' and Qiyas, and the ulama have included in this other things like Qawl al-Sahabi, etc. So the evidence for how the Sharia works is not what you think or your opinion or what the Shaykh said or what you saw in your dream or how you feel or your experiences or what your intellect tells you, what science tells you. This religion is legislated by the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma', meaning there is complete consensus from the scholars at any given time. Analogy and Qiyas, which we talked about before. Qawl al-Sahabi, what the companion has said. But there are conditions to that, and there are other forms of Daleel as well. But we'll just stick to these five. When the scholar is making ijtihad or when he is making qiyas, he will look at the evidences from these sources and say, okay, this is the religious ruling, here is our religious stance because we've got evidence from one of these five things. That is Daleel. Daleel is from the Quran and the Sunnah and Ijma' and Qiyas and from the statements of the companions. And some of the ulama have said Daleel is Quran and Sunnah because these are the foundation, meaning you can't have Ijma' without Quran and Sunnah. You can't have Qiyas without Quran and Sunnah. You can't have a statement which is credible from a companion unless you have Quran and Sunnah. So some of the scholars have said Daleel is what is found in Quran and Sunnah. So then what is Istidlaal? Istidlaal is when you use the Daleel to make your point. It's a little bit different to Ijtihad because Ijtihad is when you come to a religious ruling. Istidlal is broader than all of that. All of this is forms of Qiyas is form of Istidlal. Ijtihad is a form of Istidlal. And Istidlal now could be an issue of Aqeedah and it could also be an issue in Hadith, it could be an issue in Fiqh. It's the broadest one that we have mentioned. Why? Because you've got the Daleel and what you are saying is what I think this Daleel can apply to is this. Obviously not you, the scholar. The scholar will say, I think that this Daleel can apply to this thing and this is proof for this. Istidlal is to say, this is proof for this. So now we've got Qiyas, Ijtihad, Daleel and Istidlaal. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the best understanding of His religion. Wallahu a'lam. Sallallahu ala nabiyyina.